Our phones are quite important to us today. They help us do all our tasks, and today they've become our gaming and video recording machines. In fact, this video is currently being recorded on a phone using the Google Camera app. However, we always feel that slowness, the sluggishness after a few years of our Androids. And speeding up phones is not as easy as speeding up computers, because in a computer you can just pop out the case and pop in the RAM or upgrade the graphics card and so on and so forth. But phones are not really upgradable because the parts are so small and so locked down. So how can you speed up an Android phone then? Well, I've got a few ideas and a few tips. Let's just get right into it. Alright, so the first tip is to use gestures. This is because gestures just make your experience more fluid. See, what happens is when you click a button, like the home button on your phone, it sort of has a disconnect. It's like a shock wave that goes through the phone to then carry the animation, which does give away on the fluidity and continuity of your experience. However, when you use gestures, things are just more fluid as the animation picks off from where your finger left off. Things like swiping up to go home, swiping up and hold to open recents, and swiping from the left or right to go back are much more fluid than hitting buttons. You can enable gestures quite easily actually by going to settings, system settings and gestures, and then you can go into system navigation and enable them. So take advantage of gestures. Now, somewhat related to this is to use dark mode. This is because most devices today have AMOLED displays, and these effectively turn off black pixels, saving you battery but also meaning that the processor inside your phone has fewer active pixels to push, meaning that it's just lighter. And so what happens is, and I realize the irony of that, what happens is when you enable dark mode, not only will it look cool, but it will mean that your entire phone is just having less of a load. You can do this in the display settings of most phones. These are different based on the skin, but for example on this Pixel, it is in the display settings. Now, somewhat related to this is removing animations. This also just lightens the load on your processor, and at the risk of looking a bit chuggy, it is much faster. Things like app loading times and everything will be much faster. If you're on Android 11 and above, this is actually very easy. All you got to do is open accessibility settings and turn off animations from there. However, if you're below Android 10, you can actually open developer settings, and then there are these three settings: window animation scale, transition animation scale, and animator duration scale. And all you got to do is set these to 0 or animation off depending on your device. This will just make things open faster, as I said, lightening the load on your phone. Speaking of moving things, avoid using live wallpapers. Again, it just lightens the load on your processor. When you use a live wallpaper, it has to continuously refresh, especially if you're on the home screen and you're using one of those crazy animal live wallpapers that keep moving around. If you use a wallpaper that's not live, it's always static, so it doesn't have to keep updating it, which increases battery life and performance. Furthermore, I'd suggest you to use a black wallpaper because that will, as we said earlier, turn off some of the pixels on your display, making it just overall much faster. Speaking of your home screen, I'd suggest cleaning it up. Remove some of those crazy widgets because they will take up quite a bit of memory and processing power because they have to continuously be updated in the background. Also, remove as many pages as you can. I'd suggest putting everything in the app drawer because that way your phone doesn't have to keep reloading all of that when you restart. It's almost like desktops on Windows. The fewer icons you have on your desktop, the lesser the loading time it will take. The same is here. I usually just have one page on my home screen, but you can get away with having around 2 pages. More than that will have an effect on your phone, especially if it's a lower mid-range phone with a slightly weaker processor. Finally, in the tip of home screens and launchers, take advantage of custom launchers. These are basically apps that you can download from the Google Play Store or as APKs that will improve your experience of launching apps. They are, as we said, launchers, so they allow you to launch different things like settings and everything else. I'd suggest going with Nova Launcher or the Pixel Launcher that comes on most Pixel phones, but you can download the Pixel Launcher on any phone. The reason is a custom launcher, especially a light one like Nova Launcher, will just have fewer things going in the background, and it will take lesser time to load when you restart a phone, and it will just take a lesser time to refresh, giving your processor ample room to focus on higher demanding tasks. By the way, if you do like this video, a subscription to the channel would be speedy, I guess.
Bruh.
Alright, now for some general purpose hacks. Starting off with getting control of your standby apps. So standby apps are just apps that just restart with your phone when you start up your phone, and these are apps that run services in the background, sort of like micro apps, even when the main app is closed. WhatsApp, for example, is a very good one because it will run the call service in the background. So even when you close WhatsApp, you will still get call notifications. However, these standby apps do take up memory and processing power in your phone. So I'd suggest just closing them, at least the ones that you think are eating up quite a bit of resources. You can do this in developer options. There's literally an option there to go and switch off standby apps and get control of them. It's called running services, and it'll usually be different compared to each phone, but on the Pixel it is running services. Do proceed with caution here though, because some services are integral to Android, and I'd suggest just Googling up each service's name and what it does before switching it off. And while we're on the subject of background and standby processes, get control of your background apps. Don't really close them though, because closing background apps actually has the opposite effect that you think. See, Android is more intelligent than Windows actually. It is so intelligent that it knows how to manage your background apps, and it will close them based on processing requirements. However, if you go in, swipe your Android apps away and close them, the next time you open them, they will take a higher toll on your processor compared to when you had closed them. So I'd suggest keeping them open and letting Android manage it for you. It's easier, right? Totally unlike my life. While we're on background apps, clear up your storage. Especially use backups on Android because they're very useful. See, the thing with storage is once it starts getting filled up, Android has a harder time managing it. Because once it starts getting filled up, Android has to keep loading all of those files when you perform a search, open up a folder, a file manager, or when you just restart the phone. And that's why you may have noticed some sluggishness when you keep 100 gigs full out of 128. That's why just clean up your storage. Use a file manager and clean it up. Most file managers have inbuilt cleaning services. And if you don't have a file manager, in settings you will find a tab called storage from which you can clean up your storage. Speaking of file managers though, avoid using third-party ones, at least those that don't have a great rating. This is because file managers actually do a lot of work for you in the background. They have to keep running and they have to keep serving these files up to you in different applications. However, if you do use a third-party one that's not very high rated or whatever, it will have chances of slowing your phone down because it's continuously indexing your storage device and keeping your processor busy. I'd suggest always using Google Files, which always comes with a phone. You can also use Xiaomi's file manager or OnePlus's file manager. Those are actually quite good. But the general consensus is just use the one that came with your phone. And speaking of third-party apps, avoid using task killers and antivirus programs, especially those that claim to boost your performance. Because in irony, they slow it down. As these things continuously run in the background, cleaning your cache and everything, they start to have the same effect that file managers do, just in a much more aggressive way. In fact, Android is so intelligent that it can do antivirus stuff for you and it cleans up your cache from time to time, so you don't really need a separate process running in the background. Additionally, Android is just baked into the operating system, which means it's much lighter causing much less of a load on your processor than if you were to have a third-party one that's not so optimized for your processor. Alright, now for some system tips. Starting off with just restart your phone every once a week. It's almost like a refresh, a sort of unplug and quick breathe in and breathe out. This is because every time you restart your phone, it just clears up the junk that was lying around and it starts afresh. Though when you restart your phone for the first 5 minutes, it does lag, it will eventually speed up for at least a bit of time because you've just cleared up some of the files that were slowing it down. And while we're talking about the system, keep it updated. This is because updates actually include security patches and bug fixes. And bug fixes mean that your system is just much faster. Because once a bug is fixed, it sort of clears up one of the processing points of the phone, leading to just better speed in most cases. Most updates also just improve speed by making things lighter on your phone. So how do you check for updates if you're a complete layman? Well, just go to settings, system settings, and there will be an updates thing there that you can click on to view if there are updates. And if none of these two work, just do a factory reset. Because what happens is all your settings are cleared, which means that if you accidentally messed up something, it will be cleared and you will be set to the default, i.e. the company's favored settings. And this is actually quite useful, especially on older phones which have accumulated a lot of junk. However, don't worry about your storage because by default, Google backs up everything to its servers, which means that you will most likely have a recent backup of all your storage stuff. And finally, if you're already happy with your performance but want to take it to the next level, there is one tip that can help you out. And this is very simple. It is just going and changing your GPU settings. The way you do that is go into developer options. I will make a short to tell you how to enable that. And then go down to this section, graphics driver preferences. And if you go here, you can actually change for each app which driver should it use. And usually you should switch it to system graphics driver or game if you have that. You can also change this setting, force GPU rendering, which will be quite useful as GPU rendering, if you force it on, then your GPU will be a little more active, so graphics will improve and you'll just have snappier graphics. But I'm curious to know, which phone do you use and which tip was the most helpful for you? Let me know down in the comments down below. Alright guys, this is Phoenix signing off. I'll see you in the next one.